That brings us now to our main topic, the Keys of Marinus. Mark, you very kindly brought the gin and tonics. We've poured ourselves a glass and we're going to talk about this story. And look, I do promise you guys, next time you come to do this, we will do a Tom Baker story just for you.
No, I'm actually quite glad that your listeners, who I actually initially when the results came in thought they hated myself and Richard, but I'm actually glad they chose something different from a Tom Baker or a colour story. So I'm actually glad that the Russian bots that I launched failed.
So look, we'll kick into the Keys of Marinus. So we'll start with the place we always start with these deep dives.
Yep.
What are your memories of first seeing it?
Well, I'm fairly sure, and Dave, you might have been there, and Mark, you probably were there too. My memory is I saw it at a local club meeting here in Melbourne. I reckon either late 80s or very early 90s. It was a fairly multi-generation copy, shall we say. But yeah, I certainly remember seeing it there. I didn't get a copy probably until a few years later when I tape traded a copy. But I would be honest in saying I watched it certainly at those 2 points, so in early 90s and probably mid to late 90s. I'd be struggling to remember when I watched it actually since then, to be honest. And look, if we're getting to initial thoughts, look, my memory going into this was that it wasn't very good and it was quite cheap. Mark?
Well, Richard, I'm going to say the memory cheats for me because I don't actually remember seeing it at a club meeting.
Right.
I do remember getting a VHS copy of it from old mate Pirate Pete, if you're listening. Hello. 1989.
So you didn't share that?
No, I didn't because my quality was actually very, very good. I remember saying, this is actually really good quality. So I probably hoarded that to myself. Did a Levine and just kept it on the shelf. And I remember watching it once, obviously then. And then I don't think I ever touched it till the VHS came out, the official VHS, and I probably watched it then. Didn't really resonate with me either. And then I probably gave it another go when the DVD came out. And then probably put it back on the shelf and again, didn't really resonate. I do remember thinking, oh my God, this is so slow. It's quite turgid to get through. What's going on? And I think I made the mistake of actually probably trying to watch it all in one go.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my memories of actually watching it. So I think during my whole lifetime, I probably only watched it 5 times. So, yeah. Dave, what about yourself?
So I definitely saw it at the same time Richard did. I remember going to a club meeting and seeing a very bad multi-generation copy.
Wasn't mine.
And my memory of watching that as a young kid, I would have been 9, 10 at the time, was really being quite engaged by it. I remember being quite interested in the Vord as a very different sort of alien species. I'll discuss a bit later on. The episode that I liked most and disliked most when I was a kid are very different to my favourite and least favourite as an adult.
Yes.
I did have very fond memories of it. I definitely got the VHS and I've watched it a couple of times. I've watched the DVD a couple of times.
Okay.
And I guess as a fan of Terry Nation's work, it's something that I've always appreciated.
Yep.
And look, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about some of the antecedents of his future work that we can see in the Keys of Marinus.
Yes. But I guess before we do that, I noticed you've got the Target novel sitting there on the table. I mean, I read that years before I ever saw it.
Likewise.
I actually think I got that one fairly early, I think, in my Target collection.
Was it any good? I can't even remember it.
Well, it's a Philip Hinchcliffe, and they were usually pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Published in 1980. My biggest memory of the Target novel is the cover, which tells you absolutely nothing about the story. It's a very ordinary TARDIS over a very nondescript planet.
A grey TARDIS.
Yeah, and I remember just sort of going into that going, I have no idea what this is going to be about.
It's not selling it, is it, really?
It's really not. Now let's talk about the Keys of Marinus. Now, it is the 5th story ever of Doctor Who.
Yep.
Or to be perhaps more accurate for those who saw it going out, it was episodes 21 to 26 of Doctor Who. And we now link this as the Keys of Marinus.
Yep.
But I think for viewers at the time, it wouldn't necessarily had quite the same sort of link.
Yeah.
It's the first time a writer is brought back to the show.
Yep.
Yes.
Terry Nation, of course, having done the Daleks.
Yep.
And John Luke Rotti would be the second, very next story.
Yep.
One of the things that I think we need to talk about straight off the bat is the ambition of the story.
Yeah.
Initially, when I was putting together my notes, I thought this is a very early, possibly the first example of what were they thinking, trying to do a different location every episode and a different set. But of course, if Marco Polo existed, they did exactly the same thing.
They did, although I think they reused and redressed some of this when they're at the way stations and whatever. You just sort of put the walls together in a slightly different configuration
With a different backdrop.
Yes.
Yeah.
But certainly this is 14 episodes in a row with a
Yep.
different location every one. Now, okay, the first 7 are all in ancient Cathay.
Yep.
But it was just such an ambitious thing for a show to do.
It was. That was one of the notes I had. I sort of, if you just watched what unfolded on screen with no context or no knowledge of the history or anything, it looks remarkably cheap. But, of course, when you sit down and you think about it, and you think about how Doctor Who was made back then, and Ray Cusick says something similar if you watch the doco on the DVD, it is an incredibly ambitious story that, a new location every week.
Yeah.
It totally wrecked their budget. And, he got into trouble for, overspends, and then they sort of complained that the things didn't look good enough, and it sort of, well, hang on a minute. I've got to come up. I've got a week to come up with a set of ice caves,
Followed by a jungle, followed by a futuristic city.
That's right. You know, so with that context, look, you can applaud, to be honest, the sort of balls, if you like, to do something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are episodes where the production works better than not.
Correct.
I certainly noticed when I was watching it back over the last week, it's very obvious that every next episode they arrive, next to a very blank set.
Yep.
Because they obviously couldn't have the next one set up. There are moments of this where it does look cheap. And when I watched episode 1 back earlier last week, I did message you guys and said the production team was not having a good day this day.
No.
Now, part of that is, of course, it wasn't designed for a bunch of sad fans in their 40s to sit and watch it 60 years later.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, compare it to the Daleks, compare it to what we've seen of Marco Polo and some other stories, I do think that the director did drop the ball a bit on this one in terms of the direction.
Yeah.
And Richard, on Spacefall, a Blake Seven podcast, we have spoken occasionally about when you sit down to really watch a show and really analyse it, you can sometimes see where a director gives what we've called a that'll do performance. And there are a number of shots in the Keys of Marinus that I think John Gorrie, who only worked on the show for this one, he was giving a bit of a that'll do performance. And I think it's interesting when you look at the relationship between Ray Cusick and John Gorrie here, the director who only did one story for Doctor Who, he didn't come back.
Burn out.
But when you look at the relationship between Cusick and Christopher Barry and the Daleks, which, look, I love the Daleks, I know that there are people with pros and cons about it, but that is, again, a very ambitious show where the sets and the design works really, really well for 1964. I get the feeling there wasn't the same relationship between Cusick and Gorrie in this one. And Cusick was really trying to push the director to go a bit beyond a that'll do attitude. And Richard, you referenced the doco that Cusick has the interview on, where John Gorrie was happy for a Vord just to sort of fall backwards through a door and that was it. And Cusick said, well, hang on, the script says he falls into a pool of acid.
And you need to show that he's dead.
You need to show that he's dead, you need to show what happens. And look, that shot isn't the best shot in the show, and we can talk about,
But it's something.
It's something, and how much money do you spend on a 3-second shot on a black and white TV to be shown once?
Yeah, that's right.
But Cusick is clearly trying to push the director further than the director wants to go. And there are just a number of shots where stage hands are in there or a line is fluffed.
Yeah.
And you just get that sense of a director going, that'll do.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because I think Cusick is really trying to deliver on those sets.
Yeah.
And some of the ideas are brilliant. I think some of the morpho designs are
they're
really,
fantastic.
really strong. So I think that the cheapness doesn't come from the design or the ambition, but from perhaps the direction.
Yeah. It's almost like John Gorrie's taken a book out of the Ed Wood School of Directing, where that'll do, move on to the next shot, But
for Spacefall, we would say the George Spenton Foster School of Directing.
Yeah. I always think of Keys of Marinus now, looking back on it, it's almost like the pre-key to time, isn't it?
It is.
You're doing
a quest.
The quest is a quest.
It is a quest story in 6 parts.
Dalek Master
Yeah. I actually think jumping around those different locations actually makes it interesting.
It does. I watched it an episode a night, so over about a week.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think that was a lot better than trying to watch it in one sitting.
Yes.
Look, you can see its flaws and whatever, but at 25 minutes, none of the episodes really outstays its welcome. You do sort of get to actually, we're nearly at the end of this one. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gone quite quick, actually.
Yeah.
And I do love the idea, and it's a very Terry Nation idea, that we're not going to a planet and the entire planet consists of about 6 people in one city, in one location. There's a real sense that, and And you see the map of Marinus when Arbitan gives them their destinations. There are these cities all across this continent, and they've all got a different climate, and they've all got a different civilization.
Yeah.
And you actually feel like you've gone to a real planet.
Yes.
And when they get to the city of Millennius, like, they're very aware, obviously, that there are other parts of their world, and they probably trade furs with Vasor's mates and all the rest of that. Like, this is a planet that has a functioning society.
Yeah.
And for 1964, that's actually really impressive.
But isn't Terry Nation not very good at names, is he, really? Like, naming things like, locations and planets like Millennius and Iridius and Desperus. You know what I mean? Like, come on, Terry, push the bad out a bit, son. Yeah. Also, with this story, along with Android Invasion, it's the only story that Terry Nation wrote that featuring the Daleks.
There you go.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah,
So there you go. But I think early into Terry Nation's run, it's actually it's not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not bad. But what sort of are there any sort of key memorable moments for you in the series, both of you? Any key episodes even?
It's interesting. We're still very much in the early episodes where the hero really is Ian.
Yes,
because he carries a lot of the narrative, particularly because we probably should also mention that this is William Hartnell gets a holiday for a couple of weeks.
He gets two weeks off. Yeah,
he gets a 2-week holiday.
Yeah. Yes. Just after the one in Marco Polo where he sleeps through a sandstorm. It's unbelievable he slept through that. Yes, Hartnell was on holiday.
Yeah, so Ian is very much left to carry a lot of the narrative.
Yeah,
that's correct. I did notice that, but you can also see that switch starting to happen because when you get to part 5, it's the Doctor who has the big hero's entrance.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, the Doctor's here to save the day.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So we are in that. And look, I thought William Russell, he is great.
He's magnificent, actually. I wrote down, I said he was actually great in this.
He is great in this. I'd be honest and say I didn't get a lot out of Susan.
Oh my God, yes.
Barbara was quite good. Once we got into the City of the Morpher, Barbara was actually quite good in that. I really enjoyed Jacqueline Hill in that. But no, I didn't get a lot out of Susan.
No. You actually can see in Carol Ann's performance that she is subconsciously saying, I'm not staying around. Because it is, as being promised like an Avengers girl, and to be reduced to that, and it's not not satisfying for an actor, and certainly not satisfying for an audience participant either.
No, that's right.
So, Mark, you mentioned before sort of favourite parts or favourite episodes, and I alluded to my evolving views. Look, I probably should say my favourite episode has been fairly consistent, and that's episode 2. I just think that the Morpho City...
Oh, yeah. That would have been my pick too, I must admit.
It's a really good concept. It's really well realised. The Morpho brains are just a really creepy...
Yeah, and the voices are creepy too.
Yeah, really well done.
Yeah.
As a kid, I really loved the Jungle episode and couldn't stand the City of Millennials episode. I think I was like, the Millennials episode was just... Boring.
Yes.
And whereas the Jungle stuff had this really cool concept, whereas that's probably being reversed now.
Correct.
I think the Jungle one is now quite,
the worst.
quite poor and quite badly realised.
Yeah.
Whereas the crime procedural of the City of Millennius, and look, Terry Nation loved a good crime procedural and got them in where he could. But as an adult, I get a lot more out of that now. So those two have really flipped.
Yeah, and the performance of Hartnell as the lawyer and the defence attorney, as it were, he is fantastic in that. Where if you say, in contrast to say Doctor and other trial scenes where you've got Tom Baker in stones of blood, got the wig on, taking the piss out of it, and Colin Baker, calling people knackers yard and whatever. Where Hartnell is giving it full rumpole of the Bailey, as it were, and brings a whole lot of gravitas. I hate using that word gravitas, but he's really good at it. You know what I mean? And the defeat on him when he knows he's lost, Ian's case, and he's just sort of sitting there slumped in his chair, and he goes, he's really sort of taking it hard. Yeah, I really actually felt for the character.
Yeah. And the Doctor's the one who works out the mystery.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And of course, Barbara works out the other part of the mystery, although she does have the help of that classic detective show plot thing of nobody mentioned murder.
And with that ding-a-ding-ding-ding.
I actually thought you were going to go with the non-soundproof door. Which is another Terry trope. But
look, I actually thought that episode worked far better than I did as a kid.
Yeah, for sure. I must admit, I would think if I'd seen that probably in as a youngster, I'd have been bored stupid, I think, by part 5 particularly.
But those court scenes, I do remember watching them at the first couple of times, and I thought they were absolutely terrible. But like you, Dave, my opinion's completely switched, and the screaming jungle is actually left me. It's more carry-on screaming, I think, towards the end of it. It wasn't one of my favourites. But can we talk about The Snows of
Snows of
Terror.
Terror.
Yes.
I think The Snows of Terror holds up pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as strong as a couple of the other episodes, but I think it holds up pretty well. I think, again, as you mentioned there, Richard, William Russell's performance is absolutely sincere, and what could have been a bit of a farce, he sells.
He does. Yeah, particularly when old Vaisal's getting a bit rapey and...
Yeah, actually, watching that, I actually was really uncomfortable watching that, actually.
Yeah.
And especially when he says the line, "I can't wait no longer."
Oh.
And I'm going, gee whiz, okay. And
Yeah.
when they arrive on wherever it is in Iceland,
In
as
the
it were,
snow,
in the
yeah.
snow, right?
In the Snows
The
of
music cue they used is very similar to what was used a couple of years later with the Ice Warriors.
Yes, I know
You had
that.
that soprano.
Yeah.
It wasn't the castrati from the end of time. It was the soprano, and that sort of high pitched. Soprano-y voice, very similar to what was reused on the Ice Warriors across 6 episodes. But yes,
So is that ice music, is it? Clearly?
it could be.
But
yeah.
this wasn't Dudley Simpson.
No,
So,
no.
yeah.
So it was very interesting. There's sort of connection there. But let's talk about the scene at Mr. Rapey, as it were, Vasor. Look, it was very uncomfortable watching it, and especially when he uttered that line to me, "I can't wait no longer." And I think even in one of the other later episodes, you hear the doors close, and there's quite an audible slap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that we've discussed on the show before, that the Hartnell era really has that sort of sexual content that nothing else in the show has.
No, that's right.
No.
But I do think that as uncomfortable as the Vasor stuff is, and it is surprising looking back at it now, as a kid I never picked it up. And
No.
I think if you're old enough to know what rape is,
Yeah.
you're probably not old enough that you're going to be shocked.
Yeah.
And even as a teenager, when you conceptually know what rape is in theory, you don't have an understanding of like the horror of it.
No.
So I think that by the time you're old enough to be confronted by it, you're old enough to cope with it.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, even in a time meddler.
Well,
that's
that's
supposed to be
right,
a comedy show, a comedy series, and you have that awful scene
right.
in there. So it's quite, again, those contrasts. But yeah, I don't know whether, maybe we can say it was brave back then, but to be honest with you, that sort of stuff was in the TV there anyway.
was,
There was physical violence against women and that sort of stuff.
No one blinked at the Keys of Marinus.
Nobody
No,
blinked.
that's right.
No, absolutely at all. But yeah, mate. But now, obviously, with that. With hindsight and everything like that, and hopefully, society's got its own issues, but you're sort of looking at a different lens now and go, yeah, it's slightly uncomfortable, but
bit,
yeah.
Now, I mentioned that this is only the 5th story of Doctor Who, and we talked about the evolving character of the Doctor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk about the end of part 1, where Arbitan says, "I desperately need your help to save my planet."
And they say no.
They say no. It literally just cuts from, "I really need your help," to, "I feel really bad we're not going to help him." And he then forces them to do it. And as Lawrence Miles has said, it's not until the Sensorites, which is the first time where the Doctor says, "There is no need for me to stay. I've got the TARDIS back. Everything's okay. I've cured Ian. I'm going to stay and help these people because it's the right thing to do."
Because I'm good. Yeah.
We're not there yet.
No. Even though there's that gradual softening of the character, it's still that selfishness, like, I've got to get back to the ship and get away. This is all, too hard, as it were. But
he wants to explore initially. He's fascinated by the glass sand and the acid sea and all the rest of it. But yeah, he's sort of like, "Well, look, I've seen your planet. I don't like your planet very much. Goodbye."
it's almost like, nah.
What did we think of that initial setup? Because that was something I can remember as a kid really fascinating me. And I think that when you look at all those old textbooks, that have the 2-7 summary of stories or the program guide, the whole like acid sea glass sand was something that everyone kind of hooked onto, even though when you watch it back now, it's very clear it's actually not a feature of Marinus.
No.
It's just around that island. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's actually, a novel concept for back then.
It is.
In terms of those defences he's put around.
Yeah, and you see they've clearly gone to the effort of making the glass submersibles.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
perspex. But they look really good, and I have to say, the model work at the start, where you do that pan across the island.
Yeah, it's great.
And you see the submersibles coming in to dock or
And
to land.
And not only do you see that, you see several of them coming very smoothly to land.
Yep.
And there's one that's obviously struggling.
Yep.
Which we infer to be the one that the Vord got covered in acid.
That's right. And that's quite well done. I mean, look, it's hard, because on a big modern TV and whatever, unfortunately,
shows.
You can see everything. But I mean, and indeed going back to that doco, as Ray Cusick said, they did do it deliberately because they knew at 405 lines
It'll be fine.
on an old TV, it would be invisible.
It's the magic of Doctor Who, isn't it? It's just the magic of that of television, of that vintage at all, and films as well. You know, you just take in the context it was made, and you just sort of move past that. It's more the story and the characters and get you engaged. And if the effects work, it's great. I mean, Terror of the Zygons, for example, is a brilliant story. The effects sucked. That one effect. What, does that ruin the whole thing? No.
One thing that I think does draw the story down on rewatching is that Terry Nation has gone for the moment rather than the background. And look, he's invented a very interesting set of societies and a very interesting planet, but he hasn't really sort of worked out exactly who the Vords are and how they work.
No,
and
they are
how
a
the
bit
conscious
inconsistent.
machine works. Yeah, there is some inconsistency there, but again, they're weird, they're alien, they're bad guys. That's what you need.
They look pretty impressive, actually.
They look different.
Yeah.
Which is good. I did sort of note watching this that there were a number of sort of sci-fi cliches or Terry Nation cliches, but then I reminded myself this is 1964.
So they're not cliches.
They're not cliches. This is brand new for him. It gets cliched later on.
No, absolutely. And you can sort of see that freshness in his approach.
Yeah.
Now, a number of these ideas are recycled later on. I think you look at some Blake Seven episodes that are very similar to that. Crime procedural. He completely rips off the Morpho Brains with Samon in the web. Incidentally, the most downloaded episode of Spacefall. And I think this is the first example of a Taron on the Terry Nation story.
Probably.
So yeah, look, a lot of Nation ideas that you see come through there, but him not writing a Dalek story, I think comes off and really
it does actually. Yeah, it does.
He has to sort of reach for something else. And I actually think they did a good job on it. Yeah, I think it's actually really good. It's funny because like the last couple of months I've been watching a little bit of Billy actually. I watched Edge of Destruction instead of watching An Earthly Child on the anniversary day. It's like let's do something different. Watch Edge of Destruction. That was really good. Hartnell is always to me underrated. Even though I know he makes the fluffs and everything up, but that just sort of makes the character endearing, doesn't it? Really and. He really gives a great performance. I'm really quite... I'm actually going to go and watch some more Billy.
Okay. Very good.
I was actually really impressed with this.
No, that's really good. So look, both of you came into this a little bit down. In Mark's case, quite down on the story, not without good memories.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it now?
It was something I watched. No. Look, I did enjoy it. I haven't watched it for a long time. And look, I did enjoy just sitting there for, half an hour at the end of the day each night, putting each episode on.
Yeah.
And no, it's really good. It'll probably be a while before I watch it again, I think. But no, it was quite good for what it was.
It's been a change for me because every time I've been asked to review stories, I go and watch, I always go the ones I really, really think are fantastic and come out really slightly disappointed. So this time round, it's actually been the complete reversal where when the poll results came in and my Russian bots had failed, I thought, oh, God, here we go. But this story's been a massive turnaround for me, and I think that the key is to watch an episode a day or every couple of days.
Yep.
And, don't go into one big stretch. And there's some really good stuff in it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this story's definitely gone up high in my estimations, and I'm actually going to go and watch some more Billy. Yeah,
look, I like this story going in, and I still like the story. It was very obvious watching it on DVD on an 85-inch TV.
Yeah.
The production flaws were very obvious, and I think that does put it below stuff like the Daleks and some other stories in season 1. But it's very enjoyable. It's just classic 60s sci-fi where you can do anything. There are no rules yet. You can do anything. It's great watching Hartnell in this. It's great watching William Russell in this.
Yeah.
And just again, particularly coming out of the 60th anniversary, as I said, seeing that slow evolution of the show, seeing the Doctor slowly soften, seeing the Doctor become the hero, but we're not quite there yet, was really interesting. So I really enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a B+. What about you, Mark?
B+. Well, I actually would probably give just a B-. I mean, it was very, very good.
Yeah, probably about a B-, maybe C+ for me as well.
Yeah, definitely on the improve. Yeah, certainly from this previous grading.
There you go. Well, look, I did promise next time we did this we would watch a Tom Baker, but maybe we'll go out there and watch something a bit different next time you guys are over.
Absolutely.
Time in the Rani.
Maybe not that different.